Hello, everyone. This is Adam Meister, the Bitcoin Meister, the Disrupt Meister. Welcome to This Week in Bitcoin. Today is October the 16th. 2020, 37 years ago, the Orioles won the World Series. Oh, strong hand, long-term thinking, and they will again. Patience, conviction. Bitcoin is the next Bitcoin. Don't FOMO on alts. Yes, JW was supposed to be on the show, but he had tech difficulties. We have conviction. We have the best guest in the you today. Yeah, you've seen his great comments in the chat section before. Now he's here. You leave great chats, I put you on the show. Okay, so let's start this baby off because last night, I was on. Who knows what I was doing? Watching some informative video, and I noticed, oh man, the Bitcoin price it happened to drop. Something freaky must be going on. And sure enough, what is this? Over in Asia, we have this exchange, OKEx, and of course I've heard of it before, but I've never used it before because I've got a strong hand. A founder of the OKEx cryptocurrency exchange is being held by police, according to Chinese news source Caixin. The news comes soon after CoinDesk reported earlier on Friday that OKEx has suspended cryptocurrency withdrawals. Now, nobody likes that, citing the absence of an unnamed holder of the exchange's private keys. As the OKEx news broke Friday, cryptocurrency prices took a dive, with Bitcoin dropping around 3% in a half hour. So we've got some shady exchange over in Asia that's got some shady dude that might have done something shady. And so the shady exchange doesn't let people to take Bitcoin off the exchange anymore. And then the Bitcoin price drops by 3%, even though it's, nothing happened to Bitcoin, just another exchange. And then we've got shady Chinese news also, because you never know what's true coming out of China. What are they going to show people at the exchange just falling down all of a sudden now because they caught the OKEx virus or something? Okay, so Brian, what's going on here? What's your take on this noise?
Well, yeah, pretty wild way to enter the weekend. That article from, I think it was CoinDesk, said basically that, the issue was that a primary key holder was, I guess, unresponsive, not able to be found. But they said, oh, it wasn't that person. This just happens to be a massive coincidence, apparently, that this guy gets picked up by police, and they also simultaneously lose a primary key holder, but they're unrelated. So I don't know what to think about that story. The one thing I took away from it, I mean, and also, by the way, I hope that individual is okay and, safe and everything, because you never know what's going on over there. But the one thing I took away from this from a Bitcoin perspective is, I'm looking at headlines and articles about, quote unquote, Bitcoin plunging on news of the exchange founder, being, lost somewhere essentially. And the plunge, quote unquote, as it was 3%. And, it bounces right back. And to me, that shows sort of maturity in the market that we probably didn't see back in 2016, 2017, right after the last halving. And, I took that, with a grain of salt. But again, the news itself is bizarre. And who knows what to think. Hopefully the guy's okay. But Bitcoin, marches on.
Yeah, Bitcoin shouldn't care. There's been money laundering accusations in this story also. You've got it all in this story. And the funny thing is, like, we've been through this before, like 10 times. Like, something shady happens in China, something at an exchange, laundering money. And then it's still we have people who worry and who say it's actually it's something to do with Bitcoin. So it's nothing to do with Bitcoin. It's, there's the shady things happen. All right, Alessandro, what's your take on this story?
Well, so it kind of reminds me to the whole deal with what happened with OKEx in Canada, right? And we've seen this, and you said it, right? We've seen this already in the industry. I mean, it's interesting because I come from this side of the woods where mostly volume is peer to peer, and it's not centralized inside big exchanges and whatever. Although OKEx does have some pretty interesting operations inside Latam, specifically within Brazil. Because you do see, when you look at local Bitcoins, you will see that Brazil does not have a huge volume, like when you compare it to Venezuela or Colombia or Russia, for example. But all of the big volumes inside Brazil are coming from OTC desks in Binance and OKEx and OTC desks from Hong Kong. So, I mean, let's think about this. Like, we've already seen this, but before, like even in 2014, right, when it was hacked, uh, the exchange that had the most amount of Bitcoin in the globe, Bitcoin's price crashed like 80%, right? So, and now we're only seeing it drop like by 3%. So, I mean, I agree with you. It seems like a shady dude. In the end, look, OKEx. I mean, it's a registered company in Malta, operating inside Hong Kong. Those are parts of the world that lots of shady things happen. But I just guess that we'll have to see. But in the end, we need better security measures, more transparency from these companies. I advise lots of people inside Venezuela, like, don't do Binance. Please don't go to Binance. You'll eventually get burned. And I think it's the same with OKEx. I mean, when shady things are happening inside financial institutions, eventually the regulators come in, they crack down on some operations, they charge them with obscene fees, they get some money for their campaign and the government, and then eventually it just, I don't know, it settles down, they change the board, and they reinvent a little part of the institution's image. Am I right or not?
Yeah, it's the same old story. The ball keeps on rolling there. Everybody that's watching this live, retweet this. I'm putting it in the chat right now, and pound that like button. And if you're watching this not live, taped, do the same. You could do the same. That's how you support the show. Now, Alessandro, you said something very interesting. You brought up Brazil, and because I have the best guest in the freaking space, I didn't plan to talk about Brazil, but I'm intrigued by Brazil. Such a tremendous population. There's a lot of potential there for Bitcoin. What's the latest on what that you know about Bitcoin in Brazil? Anything you want to share?
So, regarding the latest things I know about Brazil, this week specifically and last week, I have not been so much in touch with it, only with my girlfriend who lives there.
Oh
But
yeah.
but I can tell you that I'm very bullish on Brazil, and it's not only regarding like digital assets, it's hyper financialization of their economy, because they've been supportive of the open banking regulations for the past 2 to 3 years, and so that gave birth to over 400 fintechs in Brazil. Whereas a couple of years ago, 5 to 8 years ago, the whole banking and finance sector in Brazil, 80 to 87% of it was controlled by only four banks, the four biggest banks in Brazil. And so I'm very bullish on it because when you start evaluating fintech companies from Latam specifically, they all try to become this sort of multi-currency platforms, right? Like, you hop on with dollars, and then you can hop outside of their platform with euros or a local currency within Latam, for example. And so I'll give you an excellent example. You have Value in Colombia. Value in Colombia is one of the most known fintechs that provides remittances services from Colombian pesos all the way to bolivares inside Venezuelan bank accounts. So they transact, like, they have a volume from around $1 million to $2 million, and all of that volume is processed through local Bitcoins, man. But if you go on their website, this fintech's website, you won't see the word Bitcoin anywhere, man, because it's being used as a back office tool. And Lots of people in developed economies don't know about this, but here you have the news, man. I
Dude,
think
I can continue. Sorry, it's awesome that you could just on the spot. We didn't plan to talk about Brazil at all, but on the spot. But you could just wrap this out. This is awesome, man. But what were you about to say? Sorry.
like the same pattern will emerge in Brazil, and we are seeing it already. Like I read like an article. I think it was 3 weeks ago. Like in volume, Bitcoin volume inside Brazil for that week was, or for that month was over 100,000 Bitcoins, which is a heck of a lot of Bitcoins. And so I just think that we'll continue building it. I mean, the Brazilian market will continue building on top of Bitcoin digital assets. And we also have the great news that the Brazilian central bank will introduce its own digital currency and draft cryptocurrency regulations within Brazil as well. So they will terminate this grayish area that's inside the Brazilian market, and hopefully it will be very positive for Bitcoin overall. I'm
I'm
pretty
just
sure it
impressed.
will.
I'm impressed that there are that many fintech companies all of a sudden. It's like a decentralization of financial power all of a sudden in Brazil. That sounds like something that's very positive.
I mean, dude, 230 million people and an economy that was only controlled by 4 banks. Come on.
Yeah. So I do one final South America question. We'll talk about Venezuela later because I mean I got a guy on the ground in Venezuela. We got to talk about it. But of all the countries in South America, which one it takes the lead? Does one kind of inspire the other ones? Is one setting the pace? Is it Brazil?
Dude, it's Venezuela, man. It's
Uh,
fucking Bitcoin swell, man. Like if you read Matt Alberg's articles on usefultulips.org, you will notice like Venezuela is working as the harbor for Bitcoin volume within Latam. And not only Bitcoin itself, but impressively, and I can say this from experience, the Bolivar, man. It's like, although the Bolivar was destroyed, our local currency, and we are still the only hyperinflationary economy in the world right now, it is being used as it's a utility, man. It's a tool that traders and people that do arbitrage inside Venezuela use it against Bitcoin. And so you have no idea of how many informal OTCs we have inside Venezuela. I know at least 20 of them. And some of them move, and we're talking about one of the most depressed economies in the world. Some of them move over $1 million a week, while you have people that are living hand to mouth on the streets in Venezuela. That's awesome on a perspective. On the other one, not so much. But yeah, I mean, Venezuela will continue being, man, the harbor for Bitcoin volume inside Latam, to Colombia, to Brazil, to Peru, to Chile. I know people that have Western Union franchises, and they started also using Bitcoin as a back office tool, using Paxful, using local Bitcoins, using informal Chinese OTC Telegram groups that are within Latam, informal Russian OTC Telegram groups that are within Latam.
it's amazing. It's amazing that Venezuela leads the way over a country that is financially sophisticated as Chile. I mean, it's unbelievable. Well, now that we're talking about Venezuela, Brian, do you have any questions for Alessandro about Venezuela? We'll just get into the Venezuela talk right now. You there, Brian? Oh, I don't know what happened to Brian. It looks like he's there. All right. Brian, I don't know what. Okay. Alessandro, tell us what is up in Venezuela, the big Venezuelan stories that you want to share.
So today, Maduro passed a law, a regulation, which basically allows him to create any new financial product, financial service, or financial infrastructure that is built on top of cryptocurrencies, basically to as a defense tool against U.S. sanctions and U.S. Crackdown measures on the regime's operations. And sanctions have hurt a lot the Venezuelan economy, to be honest. I don't know if they actually will help to like uh, make Maduro leave the government or like crack down the regime overall. But that's an interesting news regarding today specifically. And then last week, almost 2 weeks ago, the government, well, actually, Sunacrip, which is the cryptocurrency regulator from Venezuela, Sunacrip introduced a new stock market that is based on Ethereum. So basically, over. So
Yeah, I think I'm
basically,
back, guys.
Hey, Brian's back. Good. Keep on going, Alessandro. That is Ethereum. Oh man, I didn't know we were going to talk about that today. Yes, continue.
So basically, over the next couple of years, we will see the regulator in Venezuela introducing like security tokens built on top of Ethereum, debt issued on top of Ethereum tokens, etc. And it'll be this new, like parallel stock market to the traditional one that is already established in Venezuela. That will allow people and companies from Venezuela to also like go public via the emission of tokens. And so they call it a decentralized stock market. I don't know how decentralized that will actually be. I had the opportunity to read like all of the articles of incorporation and the procedural manuals for how you will issue tokens on top of Ethereum using this new stock market. And I'm not so bullish on that, but it's more like a slithering house move rather than Hogwarts.
All right. Now I've come up with a question here. I want to tell everybody watching this, pound that like button. If you have questions, my elite friends out there, we have answers. So type in BitcoinMeister or do a super chat if you've got questions about Venezuela, Brazil, anything that we talk about. The guests will be happy to answer them. I can answer the questions. Now, my question for you, Alessandro, though, is Venezuela leads the way. Okay, it continues to innovate because it's in a desperate situation. Let's just say there was a regime change all of a sudden and things got back to well, relatively close to capitalism. Do you think the people would drop cryptocurrency or would there be more innovation?
Not at all. I think that there will be more innovation because, I mean, everything is controlled by the government right now, right? So I think that it will lead to a way where we'll see more privatization, right, of industries, which is necessary. And Bitcoin will just come along, man. I mean, Bitcoin is all the way in the middle. Like every single direction that you want to take, you can't avoid Bitcoin, right? And so we've built so much. We've gone down the road of Bitcoin, and we've created our own like governmental Bitcoin rabbit hole already. That there's no going back from that, man. It's the future. The future is only building on top of that. And frankly, Bitcoin will be the best way to reconnect the Venezuelan economy with the global economy once again. It won't be the Bolivar. It won't be like getting the Bolivar on the Forex market on Wall Street. It won't. It will not be that, man. And that's why I'm betting with my company. Like the only Bitcoin venture that has operations inside Venezuela that is offering custodian solutions to this, Adam, banking entities and financial institutions inside Venezuela. I've talked to all of the regulators. All of them know me, and yeah, man. I mean, it's just a different perspective, right?
Well, if things change, then the secret OTC desks, the hidden, you said they're hidden ones, they'll go public. They'll be free to operate in the open, which would be great. Obviously, I hope the best for the people of Venezuela, that the government overnight turns into a magical capitalist loving economy. Now, once it's still under state control, though, they came up with something called the Petro. Is that still around?
It is still around, and you can pay for subsidized gasoline at the gas station using Petro. Like the oil barrel is around $40 in international markets. The West Texas Intermediate, right? But here, like at a gasoline station, a PDVSA gasoline station, which are all state owned, they will receive those petros from you at a rate of $60 per barrel of oil. So you're getting a better rate with respect to the international markets, and you're also receiving subsidized gas. So basically, they are starting to incentivize the El Petro usage by subsidizing gasoline at certain gas stations within the country.
Do you think it has a future at all?
No.
Well, it sounds like it's a lot more of the same. Either they're sort of subsidizing on both ends right now. That with the petro, they've got the subsidy, the artificially low price of oil, sponsored by the state already, regardless of what you pay with, and then they subsidize on the back end with the petro. So it sounds like the state is just taking cryptocurrency and using it as a way to use the exact same toolkit they've been using for the last 15 years or so.
Yeah, control the people.
yeah, and
through manipulation of a private currency. Yeah, well, a currency that they.
I know. I'm sorry, Adam. I know El Petro OTC desks that move over $1 million sometimes a day. So I can't comment much on that. I think you are aware of why.
Yeah, obviously.
But yeah, it is a thing.
Yeah, Brian, I'm glad you were back, Brian. Do you have any questions for Alessandro?
Yeah, I was trying to make. I took my camera off too because I think my internet connection kind of popped out. But I love BitcoinSuela. I love that name. I think that needs to be on a T-shirt or something. That's awesome. But yeah, I mean, I think what you were saying about the back office action of Bitcoin in Venezuela and elsewhere in South America and Latin America is just a great way to demonstrate yet another use case for Bitcoin, because these having a singular international layer of settlement is an amazing thing, and we haven't had it in a while, and it's a non-manipulatable international layer of settlement. You can see it's like countries like Venezuela gravitating towards that, and the people within Venezuela gravitating towards that because they don't have to deal with dollars if they don't want to. They don't have to deal with euros if they don't want to. And it just shows you, watching the market sort of gravitate towards this is exactly what one would expect as Bitcoin continues to gain traction. So kudos to Venezuela and the people within Venezuela for finding that and using that use case.
Awesome. And Alessandro, any more Venezuelan thoughts you wanted to share before we move, I guess, back to North America here?
So I think it's related to what Brian just said. In the end, it's this singular settlement layer Bitcoin, right, for the globe. And maybe some listeners don't like the fact, like, okay, so people are using this inside Venezuela, people are using it inside Latam as well, people in Asia, and then now we're starting to see the institutional wave and also the governmental wave, the government's getting into this. And so the next big thing will be central banks. I mean, the Venezuelan central bank has been obscurely for the past years evaluating how they could adopt their own custodian solutions and start migrating all of Venezuela's international reserves into cryptocurrencies for them to have a new form of control of the country's assets. And so I think it's important to mention it, because I don't know if the Venezuelan central bank will be the first central bank in the world to actually have Bitcoin reserves within their balance sheet. But I think it's shifting and tilting towards that. I mean, I don't know for how many months or years the Maduro regime was fighting and dealing with the Queen of England to get back our gold, and they were recently allowed to do so. And so now they're getting back $1.8 billion in gold, which is all going to be repatriated inside Venezuela eventually. And all of that will be traded for Bitcoin, man. You can count on that. You can totally count on that.
If that happens, though, it's going to prop up the regime. I mean, if they become the first country on earth to announce, that our central bank has this much Bitcoin in its reserves, I mean, I mean, it's a good move. That's what all countries should be doing. And it's just the country has been backed into a corner where it's going to do this. So I mean, if it actually comes to that, do you agree that will prop up the regime? But at the same time, do you think maybe the regime will become less socialist?
Yeah, I got a thought on this,
I mean,
Alessandro, excuse me.
yeah, I mean, if this becomes a thing, which I think it actually needs to, it would actually imply that we already have a more sound economy based on Bitcoin than based on any other like central banking based economy. Correct? Right? Like it's like the US goes around in the world and it's like you are sanctioned, you can't move dollars, you're fucked. And so that has to change. And if there's a way to change that, I think Bitcoin is the best and most peaceful way of doing that. Because in the end, if the regime starts buying Bitcoin, who are they hurting by doing that? I don't know who are they hurting. If they get propped up by that, I think that's in a way a positive thing, but because that's the way Bitcoin works, right? Bitcoin is power for everyone and power for no one at the same time. So it will sort of rebalance things globally. And so yeah.
All right, Brian, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Alessandro here. You know, I think you know, if Venezuela purchases this Bitcoin and you know Bitcoin increases in value as a result, or even just maintains its value, it not doesn't necessarily prop up the regime, because it could actually, I mean, I think it could actually hasten the downfall of the regime, because the United States and similarly situated countries and ideologically similar countries that are against this Maduro regime are going to be forced to take action if the Bitcoin, you know, that the Venezuelan regime purchases makes them more sustainable. We've survived, like the United States and you know European allies and things like that over the last 10, 15, 20, 25 years have been using sanctions as this sort of indirect but very real war measure against countries, and it is effective, sure, but it also allows people to sort of uh, you know, continue as long as they can and squeeze their population for everything they're worth while they try and survive these sanctions, these monetary sanctions. And if Bitcoin takes that arrow out of the quiver for these countries, the United States and Europe and other countries are going to have to make the decision, you know, how much do we not like the Maduro regime? How much do we not like them in charge? Are we willing to physically go in and change the regime, instead of trying to do all these roundabout ways of, you know, hobbling them, and then in which case the regime just goes on and hobbles the people to survive. So yes, it, you know, it could provide them a lot more monetary benefit in the short term, but it also might force the hand of countries who want to do something about it.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. But maybe with the threat of sanctions off the table, and then the threat of war, maybe then Maduro would say, "Well, we're going to open up the economy now and let things be more free." I mean, it could force his hand that way. I don't want there to be a war. It's terrible. And Alessandro, I want to ask you something about Maduro. What is his health like? Is he a healthy guy? And does he have a backup? Your previous leader was not very healthy. He dropped dead eventually. But what's Maduro's health like?
Well, I don't know how the guy sleeps, knowing that knowing that he's sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury and etc. Right? Regarding his health, I mean, they live like kings. It's kind of related to, I don't know, I would say the Arab world, right, where you have prince and kings that rule those economies, and so it's the same thing here. 10 guys run the whole economy, literally. And so Maduro doesn't only have Bitcoin. Maduro has coffee. Maduro has cocoa beans. Maduro has coltan. Maduro has uranium. Maduro has gold. Maduro has petroleum. Maduro has El Petro. Maduro has part of the Venezuelan banking and finance sector, so it has the control of the Bolivar. Maduro controls the Venezuelan central bank. So Maduro controls everything. Maduro controls a part of Cuba. And so Maduro also controls cocaine. So
yeah, it sounds like the setup they have in the Middle East in their oil countries. So you're an oil country and you're kind of replicating what they're doing over there. but it's
the only thing that we didn't replicate was those huge buildings and skyscrapers.
yes. That's an important part. You know, the United, say what you will about the United Arab Emirates or whatever. They definitely open up their economy. They have a free or relatively free economy. I mean, it's no comparison to, you know, the state control nastiness that you have where you are. So you're saying, though, he's got like a Politburo. If he had a heart attack all of a sudden, there'd be just another guy just like him to take his place. There's another sheik to take his place.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I mean, people need to be aware of the fact that Cuba also rules Venezuela. It's not only Venezuela. And Maduro is not even Venezuela. He's Colombian. So we have a Colombian dude that is a Venezuelan president that is in touch constantly with Cuba. And yeah, that's just how it is.
Do you know anything about Cuba and Bitcoin? I've heard different things. I've heard there have been clickbaity stories like on CoinDesk, but I thought maybe you had like some insight. If do they really have Bitcoin in Cuba?
Actually, I don't know anything about anything being related to Bitcoin inside Cuba. But I mean, if Venezuela is, again, the biggest peer-to-peer volume market sometimes globally, and we have lots of Cubans here, and the government is using cryptocurrencies, and so even the military inside Venezuela is mining Bitcoin and is using cryptocurrencies. So and they talk to Cubans and they work with Cubans. So of course, Bitcoin has been exposed as well to a small percentage of Cubans.
Well, I'm glad you have so much insight on the Latin American Bitcoin ecosystem. It's great. Before we go back to North America here, Brian, do you have any other questions for Alessandro about this topic?
I mean, I think he's covering it pretty well. We got very thorough analysis there.
Very good. Well, Alessandro, we'll at the end of the show, if you think of anything else, do bring it up. But we're gonna move to and guys, we look best freaking guest in the space. We can change topics at any moment and just you know, we didn't plan to talk this extensively about it, and there we go. You learned an incredible amount about what's going on in South America. I love it. This is a unique beast show. We got unique beasts here, baby. All right, so we talked about Venezuela and other countries possibly buying it for Bitcoin for their treasury, but no country has announced it yet. But what we've had since MicroStrategy earlier in September is corporations announcing that corporate buy-in basically of Bitcoin. Okay, and we had Stone Ridge announced this week, and who the heck even knows who knew what Stone Ridge was even was about before that. People are worshiping Michael Saylor now, and he's a smart guy, and he's got some really catchy sayings. So that some people say the corporate buy-in has flipped the Bitcoin sentiment. And I must say, once we started, I mean, I thought it was the biggest news of the year when MicroStrategy made that tremendous announcement, and it has set the tone, a very positive tone, and I liked it a lot. So, Brian, what's your thoughts on the latest corporate buy-ins? Do people worship a pedestal Michael Saylor too much? And yeah, the companies beat the countries. Are the countries next? So, Brian, take it away.
Yeah. So there's definitely a lot of Michael Saylor worship right now. I don't know if it's too bad, you know, given this just happened, and the way Saylor went in, you know, full Bitcoin, only Bitcoin. You know, he offered his shareholders the opportunity to buy back their stock at a premium after he spent $250 million buying Bitcoin and publicly announced it. So he said, "Hey, here's what I'm doing. This is my strategy. You know, do you want in or out?" Essentially. And the shareholders, you know, I imagine some probably took the premium on their stock, but that was the Dutch auction buyback that they talked about, that they did kind of simultaneously with the Bitcoin buy. And then they took another 100 and whatever million and bought, you know, the remaining. So they got something like $425 million in Bitcoin for their treasury, and only Bitcoin. And, you know, that's significant. I talk to people about this, and, you know, there's a lot of ways that other corporations that might have went in and said, I want to put treasury, I want to put Bitcoin on my reserve balance sheet. And they might have done like a grab bag of cryptocurrencies to just make the public look like, hey, listen, I'm being responsible. I know this is risky, but I'm spreading out that risk. And Saylor just went in and said, only Bitcoin, and that is a very powerful thing. He put his money where his mouth is. He offered his shareholders an out, and probably anyone that took that out is probably upset now because their stock price has skyrocketed. And he stuck with only Bitcoin after doing the appropriate due diligence in record time, essentially, because it sounds like he didn't even know really what this was in 2019. And by the end of 2020 or mid 2020, he's buying $500 million worth. So it's very impressive to me. So Bitcoin loves their heroes, and for better or for worse. So this guy gets I think he has deserved a victory lap because he put his money where his mouth was, and I don't genuinely think that any other corporate buy could have gone better for Bitcoin relative to other cryptocurrencies.
What was your take on last week's news that the Square got in on this?
Yeah, Square. Yes. Again, when MicroStrategy does it and Michael Saylor does it, who knows who these companies or people are? Suddenly, huge buy, big news, great. When Square does it and puts in a little tiny portion, 50 million, nothing to shake a stick at. But for Square, it's a tiny portion of their balance sheet in Twitter. But they've got Jack Dorsey, they've got the visibility that MicroStrategy didn't have. So you've got these two really big events. I'm kind of shocked that the price hasn't skyrocketed again. But this goes back to the maturity of the Bitcoin market. It's a lot less given and prone to wild swings than it was probably previously, because it's spread out more. More people have it. There are more holders. There are less speculators. There still are plenty, but there's less. And so getting Jack Dorsey on board and Square, I think, it's just 50 million is only the beginning. There's no way this guy that has only Bitcoin in his Twitter profile is his company's only buying 50 million. Like this might be a small he does. I think he said personally he does 10,000 a week in Bitcoin just personally. He might do 50 million a month for all I know for his company.
By the way, I'm bringing up Jack Dorsey partially because we're going to bring him up later in the show because he's made some mainstream news that maybe we should talk about. But all right, Alessandro, what's your take on the corporate buy-ins?
So I guess that's the new wave that we are seeing in Bitcoin and that we've been waiting for a long time, right? Especially early adopters, like the institutional wave getting on top of Bitcoin. And this has already happened. I mean, like we're talking about Jack Dorsey only buying 50 million of Bitcoin. But, in 2011, Chamath Palihapitiya with Wences Casales and Mickey Malka, they invested like over $1 billion in this thing. And now they're Bitcoin billionaires. And I think it's highly important that those kind of guys are one of the biggest hodlers of the industry, right? And
when you say those kind of guys, these are Silicon Valley guys, basically. I mean,
all those
that's what Jack Dorsey has in common with the guy whose last name I cannot pronounce. But continue. Sorry.
And so we're now seeing this wave of Silicon Valley guys getting into Bitcoin. We've already seen like Elon Musk playing around with Bitcoin tweets and Dogecoin tweets. But eventually, if he solves the Tesla's cash flow problem, he will be buying Bitcoins as well with Tesla. I mean, didn't we see recently a news, a Tesla disclosing that they now have Bitcoin ATMs inside a Tesla Gigafactory? So that's a huge deal. I think eventually it will continue to pick up, and under that same topic, a better treasury asset or an alternative treasury asset for your company. And so look at Apple. How many billions of dollars does Apple have in cash, man? They could literally buy banking institutions inside the US. Will it be more profitable or better for them to buy Bitcoin than a banking institutions? I think so. Will we see eventually BlackRock disclosing that they have exposure to Bitcoin? I think so. Will we see Goldman Sachs eventually disclosing that they eventually hold Bitcoin within their treasury reserves? I do think so. I mean, Goldman already bought Circle for like I think it was 300 or 400 million dollars almost. So all of this, it's impossible that we don't see all of these big U.S. tech savvy firms and all of these U.S. investment firms getting into Bitcoin. I mean, we already have Jack Dorsey. We already have the guy from MicroStrategy. Look the Grayscale Bitcoin Investment Trust holdings continue to pick up, and they will continue to pick up. I mean, yeah, that's my take.
Scarcity. It's getting more scarce out there for all you regular Joes. Don't be complaining in 2024 about how rich these Silicon Valley bros are. You want to get in now. Now, speaking of, I just Jack Dorsey. Do you have any thoughts, Alessandro? Do you care about the news that Twitter is clearly? I mean, I don't know how much both of these guys' Twitter's accounts are linked to below, so you can follow both these guys and JW, who just couldn't show up today because he had tech issues at the last second. You can follow all three of them on Twitter. But Alessandro, the news that goes beyond Bitcoin, Jack Dorsey's Twitter clearly is politically biased. There was some censorship. Do you have any thoughts on that? People are really going crazy. You know, the government should regulate Twitter, they're saying.
Well, I mean, I respect the dude a lot because I think he's an important voice of Bitcoin, right? Because we need those kind of guys talking positively about Bitcoin. And so he's just another one, right? You got, again, Chamath Palihapitiya, which is one of the loudest voice inside those very tiny circles, because those are tiny circles. What I think is that why did Square not buy Bitcoin before? Why is it not buying more Bitcoin already? Because he can't. He knows it. He knows that he needs to do this bit by bit and not go all aggressive about it. Because he has to behave, right? He has to be a good boy. He's the CEO he's the CEO of more than $1 billion company, two of them, right? And look at what Square's share price has been doing after the pandemic, and that's all related to Bitcoin. Look at how many revenues they now have thanks to Bitcoin trading, Bitcoin buying, and Bitcoin selling inside Square Cash App. The dude built one of the best on-ramp and off-ramp services for Bitcoin inside the US, and he doesn't have a Coinbase rhetoric behind him. So I think that's highly important. I just guess that we will continue to see this institutional wave continue to pick up, and it will not be only Twitter. It will be Twilio, and it will be the Google guys, and it will be the Apple guys, and it will be the Salesforce people. It will be everyone. I mean, they're all next to each other. They drink coffee together. Will they not trade Bitcoin together and hold Bitcoin together?
Well, I'll say this: you bring up an interesting point. You said he's being a good boy or good team player in terms of fitting in, I guess. I think his company's recent move, Twitter, this censorship thing, he definitely is. He can be quite politically correct and join the trendy social justice mobs that are out there. But it just shows you that you can have. And so many Bitcoiners are not that way. They don't want to fit in. Fitting in is overrated. Pound that like button. And are not part of social justice warrior mobs. But Bitcoin can't exclude anyone. So on one end, he's doing awesome things. He's really promoting Bitcoin. On the other end, his company has started to clearly do some strange or just it's not strange, in your face political censoring that really should we say, supports the establishment. So Brian, what's your take on that aspect of it, on the censorship story that came out?
Yeah, I think also you make a good point that enemies can own Bitcoin together. It's just like any other widespread monetary standard throughout history. When an invading country succeeded in invading their neighbor, they didn't say, "Oh, we don't want that crappy gold. That's their gold. It's a disgusting form of money." No, they want that gold. So enemies who hate each other want to exchange in the best asset that they can exchange with. So yeah, I mean, there's no reason that you can't, like, people you can ideologically disagree with can't both own and support Bitcoin and help it out. But yeah, from the censorship angle, it's disappointing to see a large forum like Twitter, a public forum like Twitter, not in a legal sense public forum, but a large publicly available forum start censoring people. I don't think that it calls for some sort of government intervention. I think the best way to counter these things is vote with your feet. And to the people who say that that's not practical, or they have so much sway, no one tells you have to delete your Twitter account and move over to some new service like you do, Adam. Like, you can do parallel social medias at the same time, and it doesn't cost you anything extra. It's maybe an extra click. It's no big deal, and eventually, people are going to, if it's this time with Trump, it will be something else the next time that irritates another side of the political spectrum. And you can't, it's not a good business model to censor the people who produce the content for you when your entire business model is based upon aggregating content that you yourself do not create. So it won't work in the long run. I don't think that I think that the effect of having the government step in and regulate these entities will have more probably negative knock-on effects than the visceral sort of short-term satisfaction of saying, yeah, we stuck it to Jack, he can't censor us anymore. And like you said, or like Alessandro had said, yeah, I don't think Jack's in there, plugging away saying, I don't want that, I don't want that, I don't want that. He's the CEO of a massive company. There are a lot of stakeholders in that company. And, to the extent that he maybe agrees with this policy, it's not his own to create. It's a publicly traded company with a board of directors and a ton of stakeholders and lots of employees. So I don't think he's out there behind the curtain like the Wizard of Oz. But yeah, again, I do think that the proper solution is to vote with your feet, and again, parallel posts and things like that. And to the people who say it's impractical, I mean, the Bitcoin itself is the greatest voting with your feet moment, probably, certainly in my lifetime, maybe in American history, possibly larger than that, because money is the principal way that you can sort of softly control the actions of your population. And Bitcoin is an opt-out vote with your feet, and it's gaining traction. So people like us, if we think we can opt out of money, I mean, we better be able to opt out of Twitter and some rinky-dink microblogging site. So that's my thoughts on it.
And by the way, moving, vote with your feet. Definitely, I agree with that. Watch yesterday's show, people. I talked about how I'm BitcoinMeister on Parler, and that this is an opportunity for Parler to use Bitcoin as a solution to defeat Twitter, to incorporate Lightning Network over at Parler, for Parler to become totally pro Bitcoin. That would differentiate them in a huge way from what's going on at Twitter. It's an opportunity. People see this as, let's use force to change the way things are, and force being the government. I see this as an opportunity for competition to jump in. And my advice and as I said, I want to do a series of shows where I focus on current events and say how Bitcoin can fix those current events. And this is one that Bitcoin can fix, or it could if Parler adopted it. And so watch yesterday's show, people. It was a very a different show there. So you gave me a way to segue into that, Brian. But and Alessandro is, of course, in a communist country, so his internet went off. That's the way it works down there. You never know what you're gonna get. Maybe he will return. And it's very interesting. I actually had a premonition that it would only be Brian and I talking at some point. And my premonition has come true. This happens sometimes. It's odd.
A terrible thought.
So yeah. Brian, any more thoughts on that topic before we move to Bitcoin as a First Amendment tool?
Yeah, I just think I agree with what you're saying about Parler has an opportunity here. This is one of your classic compete, don't complain situations. If you're Parler, you got to be thanking Twitter for what they just did, because they have an opportunity now to really set themselves apart from the standard bearer in the industry that they're trying to disrupt. And it was given to them on a silver platter. So Parler needs to be doing absolutely everything that they can to advertise on this and get people involved. I think yesterday in your show you said, maybe incorporate Lightning Network or some other cryptocurrency, version to just add a little bit of something extra to differentiate themselves. So, hey, look, we won't censor your content. And guess what? We've got a little something extra here that might entice a community of like-minded users to come in. I don't necessarily, I worry that Parler will get too conservative. I get their emails because I have an account too, and I will now be cross-posting because what Twitter did was wrong, and they need to either rectify that or I will leave. No loss to them, my leaving, but if enough people think like me, that is a loss to them. So I'll be cross-posting. So I get Parler's emails. I just worry that I don't want them to become the conservative Twitter. I want them to become the non-censoring Twitter, the all are welcome type Twitter, because that's what's really needed. We don't need a conservative Twitter and a liberal Twitter, and then a moderate Twitter. What we need is just a simple across the board post what you want type philosophy. And I think if they can do that, that's great.
And that's what the CEO announced. Coincidentally, before this story went down, the CEO of Parler said, "We're not censoring." That's all we need. That's all it is. You make a great point. Like it's not a winning strategy when you depend on your business depends on content being created by individuals, and you're getting rid of that content. I mean, of course, it's like we've got billions of posts out there, so I mean, just getting rid of a little bit of it, but still, the basic point holds true that you don't get rid of your bread and butter. But anyway, let's see how it develops. People compete, don't complain, as you said. Gregor Kovacs, the great Gregor Kovacs, sent $10. Thank you, dude. He says Shabbat Shalom, and he says some support for your channel. Best guest in the space. You better believe it.
I like that.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I will say that I just found out that Alessandro actually he had a family emergency. He had to run. And yeah, Venezuela is socialist. They're not communist, but still, when I get frustrated with Venezuela, I just call them communists. But they are. It's status. That's all you. It's collectivist. That's all you got to worry about, people. You don't. Individualism is the accomplishment. Collectivism is the default. As you're seeing more and more people all over the world fall in line with what their leaders tell them to do. Just be part of the Borg, the machine. Okay, so let's talk about one of the things you're interested in and was brought up last week. We were talking about Bitcoin, First Amendment, constitutional aspects of it. Take it away, Brian. You have some legal knowledge here.
Yeah. So I'm a lawyer by trade. I'm not a First Amendment lawyer, so I don't have extremely specialized knowledge in this arena, but I do follow along. And I think what was said last week was basically, are there any First Amendment protections for Bitcoin, in the United States, to the extent they start trying to regulate its use? The regulators start trying to regulate its use here, and there isn't a hard answer. Unfortunately, with the law, there almost never is, particularly with the First Amendment, because there's a lot of considerations that a court will consider when weighing whether a First Amendment, freedom of speech or a freedom of association right has been illegally or unlawfully or unconstitutionally infringed. But to the question I think the person has, is there one? I think that this still needs to play out. I mean, the internet's still so very new. Bitcoin is even newer. So courts are, they're very slow. But they do often, they can get it right. When they get it wrong, they can overturn themselves. There's a couple of good cases though. This one on Packingham versus North Carolina talked about how a law that forbid anyone from going on any social media site in North Carolina, it was a law targeted towards sex offenders. They said any sex offender who has been convicted cannot access a social media site where they know that children will have profiles, people under 18. So that was like Facebook, Twitter, a lot, because I think they have a 13 or an up requirement for most of those sites. And this went all the way up to the Supreme Court because the plaintiff was a registered sex offender who posted about on Facebook how he got out of a speeding ticket or something like that. I guess the local police department found it and prosecuted him under this sex offender rule about accessing social media sites. So it goes all the way up to Supreme Court. And Supreme Court strikes it down, saying basically that the internet is where you engage in speech. You engage in speech that is diverse as human thought itself, and so that a state government or a city government cannot give you what's called a prior restraint on accessing that forum. So, this person was not allowed to access the forum whatsoever, and that's an extreme prohibition on that person's free speech rights under the Constitution. And the Supreme Court struck it down, saying that this is a prior restraint. If you're upset with the content of the speech, yada yada, we can talk about that. But just saying that you cannot access the internet network or a social media network is unlawful. And it is a very good analogy to Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is at bottom just a network, and you use Bitcoin to access that network. That's what a Bitcoin transaction is. That's what every transaction fee is a fee that can only be paid in Satoshis or Bitcoin in order to use and utilize the network. And Bitcoin isn't just monetary transmission or value transmission, but from the Genesis block onward, there have been text and speech and political speech. I mean, Chancellor and second bailout of banks is probably the most political speech that you can do at that time period. And it was in the Genesis block, the very first transaction. So, I think regulators sort of narrowly construe Bitcoin as, oh yeah, well, this is maybe a way that they can launder money or something like that. And in actuality, it has a lot broader application. And they're going to find, I think, over time, because what will happen is they will overregulate. Probably they will try and do something that hinders the network or hinders your access to it. But the courts, they'll work their way through it, and I think that they may find that there are First Amendment protections to access and use of the Bitcoin network.
All right, I'm great. Yeah, I'm very grateful to have a legal scholar here to discuss these matters. We've got a diverse group here, best freaking guest in the space, as I say. Now I want to move on to another governmental legal type of issue, and this was from last week. But William Barr announced his publication of the Cryptocurrency Enforcement Framework. What was your take on that?
Yeah, so it was an 80-page document. I got through most of it. I think that basically it's the foundational layer to pitch to the public of why they should be able to regulate and criminalize maybe potentially use of certain cryptocurrencies. What I really like when I see that, though, when I read through it, they basically said, hey, here's what we've done. We stopped this terrorism ring. They were asking for Bitcoin. We stopped this child sex trafficking ring. They were using Bitcoin or some other cryptocurrency, Ethereum, I think maybe. And they said, look what we did. This is why cryptocurrencies are dangerous. But and I think I even mentioned this in a comment on a prior show of yours, Adam. These are independent legal violations that they're busting. It's not the use of the currency that is illegal. It's the independent legal violation, perhaps facilitated by a currency, but in the same way that cash facilitates independent legal violations, sure, any transfer of value can facilitate a legal violation. So I don't see, I looked at their report, and I don't see anything that suggests that they should have any extra authority over cryptocurrency than they do. Then they could saying, the dollar is now illegal, or the use of gold is now illegal. Now, obviously, gold has been made criminally. Executive order in 1933 said you can only hold so much amount of gold, give everything to the bank. Sure, they can go ahead and try that, but it's not a practical solution for them, because there's no way that they could possibly confiscate that. So they're going to run into some sort of novel problems with trying to regulate cryptocurrency in the traditional way. But I think if they just stay in their lane and stick with what they know, you can prosecute all these independent legal violations all you want, as far as I'm concerned. But the use of cryptocurrency shouldn't be an independent violation itself. And again, back to the First Amendment issue, they may not even have the authority to do that here in the United States.
All right, I like it. I like this. You explain it very well. Now, there is a question out there from the audience that I guess was meant for Alessandro, but maybe we can answer it. I've got a good guess answer, at least. How long have Cuba and Venezuela been working together? Well, I would say it has to be since Chavez took over, which I guess was in 1999.
Yeah.
Whenever that was, I think that it was immediate. Once you become socialist, you in Latin America at least, you pair up with Cuba. immediately. I don't quote me on that one, but I'm pretty sure that's how long it's been going on. So look, since Chavez took over, which I believe was in 1999. Brian, you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say is maybe it was a little sooner because that's might have what helped him take over in the 90s. Yeah, I think once you remember that club, they sort of they support you.
Yeah, quite a club of winners there. Now,
Yes.
all right, and Alessandro, it's unfortunate he had to go, but he'll answer that on another show. Give us the correct answer. I also want to point out, yesterday someone asked me about the shirt I was wearing, where they can get it. I linked to it below that show, and I also linked to it below this show. The specific shirt you can get at cryptoverge.com, the profit shirt, it's called. So I guess we're at the end of the show here. Brian, do you have any conclusionary thoughts? Anything that was left off that you want to talk about here?
I don't think so. I just want to, I do want to reemphasize.
Keep on saying what you were saying there, Brian.
I was just wanted to reemphasize the importance that I still don't think everybody grasps it or cares about it. The importance of the Bitcoin exclusive treasury buys by these companies. I think that shows why, I hear from alternate ends of the crypto spectrum that Bitcoin doesn't innovate. Bitcoin is boring. Bitcoin is this. It's just, they just hold it. It's like they're not doing anything with it. The methodical way that Bitcoin advances is incredibly important to someone who's about to put $500 million into your network. And that's what MicroStrategy did, and Square's working their way, and any other fiduciary. They don't want ridiculous features to muck up the network. This value transfer network that is Bitcoin. They want methodical, very thought out progress, and that's why you see these companies are going exclusively into Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is difficult to change, and that's a feature of the Bitcoin network. It's not a problem with it. It's not something that needs to be critiqued or not something that needs to be changed. So it's very important, and I think it was very validating for me to watch these sort of large companies that are publicly traded go into Bitcoin only, because it shows that it's a very mature network. It is a very core set of developers that are methodical, and I think that's what's going to set it apart. It's not chasing the laser pointer around the room trying to find the next shiny object. It has the humble goal of transforming the global standard reserve currency. So let's just stick with that, and hodl your Bitcoin and be methodical about the network.
People, and I often talk about how Bitcoin not changing, it sounds so boring, but this is what the big boys want. Okay, they don't want something that's going to willy-nilly all of a sudden there'll be 28 million of them. Okay, it is the security truth machine. It is not changing. And in a day and age where there's so much instability, things are changing. You don't know what truth is. It's more valuable than ever. It's more treasured than ever. So people love all these bells and whistles that all these altcoins are adding. And they say Bitcoin is old, Bitcoin is boring. No, you've got it completely wrong. That is such a feature. It is so glorious. It is totally counterculture. Personal responsibility is new counterculture. Just being stable is the freaking counterculture of money.
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
there you go. All right, let me just see if there are any other questions over here, dudes. This is your last chance. All right, it was a great show, man. We had incredible conviction. We went from 3 to 2 to 1 guest, and we ripped it apart, dudes. So please share this show on Twitter, dudes. Pound that like button. You get a new This Week in Bitcoin every freaking Friday, dude. So I'm Adam Meister, the BitcoinMeister, the Disrupt Meister. Everybody have a great weekend. Shabbat Shalom, and I will see you soon. Ending the stream now. See ya.